Hey guys, Kevin here. So I want to talk about something today that is fun for everyone, and I am talking about guns. Lovely, beautiful guns. Fun to hold in your hand, fun to shoot. I love my guns, guys. I'm not a person who goes out wearing camouflage and running around the woods every weekend, but I have been known to go out once in a while with some friends to train and shoot firearms. I'm an oath keeper after all, and I consider myself a three-per. Even though there are a lot of guys who are a lot more hardcore than I am with that stuff. Personally, I'd rather play general than play soldier, but that's another discussion. Right now I want to talk about guns and gun control and the situation developing around Las Vegas, the shooting. We saw what kind of damage a fully automatic firearm can do in the hands of a psychopath. Now, fully automatic firearms are very hard to get. And even if this guy had a bump fire stock, which he did not, you heard the rounds, that was not bump fire, that was full auto select fire. You know, even if he did get his hands on a fully automatic weapon legally, you know, it's about as easy to get a fully automatic weapon as it is to get dynamite. And he could have bought a shitload of dynamite and blew everybody up. There's nothing that's going to stop some psycho from doing something like this. And the fact that he hit a country western concert makes me think that, you know, maybe he was out there for Republican blood. And maybe he was one of these people who thinks guns should be illegal. And that's typically who you see pushing for gun control, are the people who don't trust themselves with guns. And by the people, of course, I mean Democrats. Democrats commit most of the crime. They are the ones who are so prone to violence. We see the violence from them everywhere, all the time nowadays. Yes, of course they don't trust other people with guns because they don't trust themselves. And we all know that leftists project. That's what they do. They project their hate onto people. They project their racism onto people. Guys, I've been called a racist so many times in my life by leftists who are white and privileged. And meanwhile, I have mixed race children. And I don't care about race. I've never talked about race in a conversation with any of my right-wing groups. So it's except when saying, you know, oh, the left obsesses over race. That's when we talk about race. But, you know, they project, and they don't trust themselves, so they don't trust other people with guns. And it very well could be that this guy wanted to prove a point. You know, he wanted to go out there and do as much damage as possible because he was pro-gun confiscation. And he had the means to buy a lot of fully automatic weapons, which are very expensive. You pretty much have to be a millionaire to have the kind of arsenal that this guy had. Anyway, that aside, whatever his motives were, the left has hijacked the conversation once again and brought it to gun confiscation or gun control. And what they do, they sell it as gun control, quote-unquote gun control. Let's do stricter background checks. Well, you know, that's very broad spectrum there when you talk about stricter background checks, because in the hands of a leftist-run state, who would ever get guns? We've seen this everywhere communism has been implemented. They don't completely make guns illegal. I can tell you, having lived in El Salvador, it's almost impossible to get a gun there, but the Moreros, the gangsters, the MS-13 all have guns, and the communists who run the government all have guns. So they have a monopoly on thuggery and a monopoly on violence, which is what statism is. It's always been a monopoly on violence. Government is a monopoly on violence. They use violence to extort people's money from them. And that's what taxation is. When people say taxation is theft, it really is. Because when you have property tax and you can't own your home, and if you don't pay it, the government comes with armed men, the police in that case, to steal your home from you, that's theft. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. And that's why we should never let the government have a monopoly on violence or monopoly on the possession of firearms. It just doesn't make sense. We've seen what tyrannical governments look like. And if the left who are planning all this violence and all this anarchy and have a revolution, quote unquote, a revolution, that's what they say, planned for November 4th, these are the same people who want to take away your guns. The people planning revolution. If ever there was a time to keep all our guns, it's right fucking now. Wouldn't they love to go take our guns before they start a revolution? Because they know that the one thing that will stop a leftist revolution in America is a bunch of patriots and veterans like myself who are trained and well armed, stopping their sadistic, evil communist revolution. So yes, of course they want to disarm us, and maybe they would do some pretty crazy stuff able to disarm us. So I don't put anything past the left, guys. I don't put anything past the government either. But that said, gun control is never about control. It's always about confiscation or complete, well, it's complete control. It's never about making certain restrictions that would limit the firearms falling into the wrong hands. Guys, I have something to tell you guys. A lot of times the left makes this argument that, oh, Europe banned guns and they're a lot better off now. Well, they're not. That's bull. They have just as many murders and assaults, but with knives or other items instead of guns. The truck attack in Nice, France took out way more people than the guy with the fully automatic rifles in Las Vegas. They killed more people in that truck attack. On top of that, the restrictions that they want to place on guns would not limit any kind of crime that we've seen, because let's face it, if they want to disarm people, if they want to take away guns from law-abiding people, why don't they first go take away guns from the people who are not law-abiding? They never want to talk about gun confiscation or gun control in inner-city Chicago or any other Democrat majority area. You know, if they can't disarm the people who cause all the crime, if they can't go into their homes and take their guns, why should we give up ours? Why should we give up our gun rights if they're not going to control crime and control the people or deal with the people who commit all the crime? And that's their base, so why would they? They wouldn't do that anyway. But, you know, it just makes sense that, for me personally, I will consider giving up my firearms. And I say consider because I wouldn't really give up my firearms, but I would consider it. I would at least consider having a discussion about gun control once the left goes into Compton, goes into inner city Chicago, and disarm all the little wannabe gangsters out there. Until then, I think the best way to control guns is to shoot as many of those little bastards breaking into our homes as possible. That'll take a lot of guns off the street. Next time you see one of these gangsters, take a pot shot at them. Let them know that we're not going to play with them anymore. Next time you see one of these violent leftists trying to attack an innocent person or trying to break somebody's car window so they can hurt them, you know, encourage those people to defend themselves. Gosh dang, the Democrats want to take away our guns and leave us vulnerable so that they can go out and empower the world's degenerates and the world's worst people. And I've seen it done. I've seen what happens in these communist and socialist countries. Go to Nicaragua, go anywhere. They always say, oh, it's Europe, it's better. Well, that's because Europe had white hegemony and had the prosperity of America lifting them up during the Cold War period. But now that things are changing culturally and financially for Europe, Europe is going into a tailspin and their crime is going up. Meanwhile, even though it's Europe, the Western Hemisphere, our area, all of Central America, Mexico, South America, everywhere in our hemisphere where they've made guns illegal, crime has gone up. El Salvador has the worst crime in the world, the highest murder rate. It's scarier down there than I was ever scared in Iraq. And that's because they've empowered the gangsters, they've empowered the leftist agitators, and they've disarmed the general public. And people live like victims. I don't want to live like a victim. I don't want my kids to live like a victim. One of the reasons I became such a vocal right-wing activist is because of what I saw down in El Salvador. So don't ever let the left convince you that any kind of gun control is reasonable. Because for them, it's not about control. It's about confiscation and monopoly on violence. And we have to stop that. We can't ever let them have an inch because they will take a mile, like we've seen with everything else. Anyway, I'm out.